Welcome to the first in a series of podcasts powered by J3 and Showhouse magazine. My name is Rupert Bates. I'm editorial director of Showhouse and whathouse.com. I'm delighted to welcome our two guests today. We have Jack Bristow, managing director of J3 Advisory, and James Calland, managing director of Approved Consultant Services. Clearly a hugely important topic that we're going to discuss today, the whole world of insurance, etc. And I suppose, gentlemen, if we sort of start at the consideration that housebuilders really need to keep in mind currently when it comes to the world of building warranties and latent defects. Obviously, you've got lots of different developer types you work with, whether it's BTR, SME, volume, regional. But what are the key concerns, the key considerations that our industry should be looking at today? Who would like to start on that?
I'll pick two to kick us off. I think timing and communication is a thread that runs throughout everything we do with developers, and I think that as everyone should know, the earlier you engage on insurance with the insurers themselves or via your advisor, with the surveying team so they can have some input into design, which I know something that James will touch on is key, and communication with regards to presenting the project and the risk itself to make sure that everybody understands what the common goal is, what the objective is with regards to what's being built and how that's going to happen. I think doing those, communicating in a timely fashion is the first step on a relatively long journey for that development. So definitely timing and communication from our perspective.
Yeah, I think many of the things we'll probably talk about today will also hinge on some level of timing and level of communication. And to expand on what Jack's touched on there, from a surveying point of view, it is very much that there's obviously various providers in the market nowadays, but fundamentally when you strip back the logos and the head office locations and things like that, there are still standard industry fundamentals that must be hit as a target, and part of that comes down to the timing. And I think the earlier you can engage with the likes of Jack and then the surveyors and the providers, the better standing you will put yourself in. I think from a surveying perspective, what we see nowadays is that, rightly or wrongly, insurance, or as insurance is seen as another insurance type product like car insurance, it's a case of generally the population buys their car and then thinks about the insurance at the 11th hour just to drive the car out the showroom. However, and whilst that's possible to do from a latent defects point of view, actually, if you can engage with it through the latent defects process as soon as possible, early in that life cycle, you will actually achieve a more beneficial standing for the project going forward, whether that be commercially or from a design aspect.
Do you think, though, that there's an issue, isn't there? Because, we sort of joke about insurance, dry old topic, etc., etc. Do you find that the house building industry almost see it as, well, it's obviously very necessary, but they have so many other considerations in terms of what they've got to do? Does it therefore then become more of a tick box exercise, which by that very nature means they're not necessarily getting the best deal, seeking the best advice? It's just something they know they have to have.
Yeah, I think that's certainly the case. I think it's one of those things that can be pushed towards the starting point of the project. You can have it arranged, as James says, the earlier you do it, the better. But it is often one of those items that works its way. It may start reasonably high on the list, but it works its way down as more pressing things push forward. And I think also, not necessarily a lack of understanding. People have their experienced developers have their way of executing on insurance, especially when it comes to latent defects. So I think that you don't know what you don't know. So are they minded to go out and say, well, actually, do we have significant challenges to look at an alternative? And if we've always done it the same way, we know that we can leave that until a month before we start on site to get that policy in place, and that allows us to deal with more pressing matters. I don't think we're going to change the direction of travel and timing with regards to when developers take the warranty out, sadly. But I think understanding some of the complexities and the upside that comes from arranging it earlier. James talks about having input from a design perspective, having that can have a direct impact ultimately on the total build cost, and can keep it at the level you've started at, or potentially reduce it if it's later on, and then you've set in stone what your design plan is, and you're working towards pre-commencement and getting going on site, and then you get design input and you need to change that. There's a cost attached to that, as well as the practical side of being on site. And the later you leave these things, it doesn't leave you time to necessarily go through the detail, ask the questions you want to ask, and get to where you want to get to. If you're starting on site and you need somebody to be there to monitor what's happening with foundations, you're going to need to press the button even if you're not quite ready or quite happy with the policy. So, and again, you can end up making, be it a poor decision on provider, or indeed overpaying for the policy, which I think is probably our biggest mantra is the earlier you get involved, the less chance there is of you being overcharged for the policy. And everyone, especially in the market we're in, has a keen eye on costs.
I mean, we often hear about developers being concerned about sort of design input from their structural warranty partner. However it's known, I think most claims tend to relate to workmanship rather than design defects. Is there a particular focus there that you should be looking at? What are the priorities?
No, I think the reason there's a heavy onus now more than ever on workmanship is because 2023 products, whilst there's new products emerging on the market all the time, a lot of the projects are, even the MMC type projects, the modern method type projects, they're still using several tried and tested either materials or processes, and those they have been refined over years, and they generally come from very reputable sources. So of course products fail, take it back to the analogy I gave earlier about a car. Your car may have a product recall, but there could be 50,000 of them in the marketplace, so nothing is impossible. There can always be a concern with the material itself. However, particularly in the UK construction industry, no different to other areas of the world, is a lot of construction projects are still built by your hands. They are still ultimately constructed by individuals, and as good as we all are, we're only human and we make mistakes. And workmanship, I would say, is the single largest defect that we will see on a project. Now, the defect, we talk about latent and inherent defects, so they're defects to come in the future. But the whole point of the surveyor is to protect all parties involved, to try and remove or reduce the risk of a defect being placed into the project today. And whilst it may not come out today, it may come out in the wash 3 years' time. If we can get it correct today, then we haven't got to worry about that in 3 years' time.
I mean, it's interesting what you say, James, about, yes, the hand of the human. I mean, often, isn't it? It's probably marketing more than anything else, isn't it? That I think housebuilders will go out with, move into your perfect home today, and maybe there is their education, isn't it? That there are so many different component parts that go into any new home on a good day or a bad day, and so actually at a sort of almost at a marketing level, do you think maybe we almost oversell the brand new home and then needs to manage sort of the expectations more, that there will be issues? Yeah,
I think from a marketing standpoint, that was what I was going to talk about with regards to the design process and being involved early. There's no doubt that it's in the interest of the developer to have their insurance provider on board early, so they can get that input before things are finalised and set in stone. But equally, as I'm sure many developers will identify with, rather cynically, I think it also suits the narrative of the insurer when dealing directly with the client to get them involved early, because if they give a design specification to a developer and it's built to that specification, you're almost wed to that provider at an early stage, which suits the objectives of the insurer from a selling insurance perspective. So there's a healthy balance to find between the two, I think. And the technical hand manual, I know, is a challenge that a lot of the house builders and developers wrestle with from an early stage. So I think that's, and it's easy to say as the advisor in the room, but that's one of the benefits of having that conversation with somebody that sits on your side of the table. And as you've identified with the question and James has answered, where the concerns are around workmanship, you can see why the developers, their frustration when it comes to, so we have to get the design input here, but one does follow the other. If the design is right, then it allows for the workmanship to be that much better if that's what they're working to the right spec. With regards to managing the expectation of the consumer, I think it's a difficult thing to do because it's one of the largest purchase for everyone when they're buying a home, and it's an emotional transaction as well. So if you move in and everybody sees the bad news that comes out in the press because that's what sells, but where you see it on site specific schemes where they talk about having tens or hundreds of remediations that are required, a lot of those sit around snagging, and where it's the larger house builders that often have the mud thrown at them in those situations, you're often talking about a scheme that's got thousands and thousands of units on it. Yes, okay, there are hundreds of remediations that are needed with regards to snagging and other details. But when you look at that on scale with some perspective, there are going to be challenges. I think where there has to be improvement is on the communication at that end with regards to once the transactions happen and the sales happen and someone's moved in, how quickly the developer's customer service team moves in to rectify that, because there's obviously a journey that happens before it ends up with one of the national newspapers and gets some coverage. I think that there's some management needed in there certainly, but I'm not necessarily sure it's the expectations of the consumer that's needed. I just think it's that journey they go in once they've purchased the house. If their expectations are here, then the customer service level that follows it obviously needs to be closely following.
I mean, because James, presumably, you must have seen quite a few houses. I mean, do you, obviously no names, no patch, but do you think, house builders, as we said before, there's, negative stories hit the headlines. Not in Showhouse magazine, we're always very balanced, obviously, but national newspapers, love to bash the builder, if Mrs. Miggin's boiler isn't working, etc. But in all seriousness, do you think house builders, they get a bad rap? Actually, there's a lot of very clever stuff being done out there. It's an incredibly complicated process, and a lot of them do a great job.
They do, yeah. I mean, as Jack said, bad news sells. We probably only read and hear about the 1% really, compared to everything else that's going out there in the wider world and industry. You're quite right. I've seen the really good, the bad, and the unfortunate ugly sometimes. But it doesn't matter if it's a single unit plot self-builder or 3,000 units in a field, or a 60-story tower in one of the major cities around the UK where they've got 1,000, 1,500 2- and 3-bed apartments. Funny enough, and this is what I said at the start of our conversation, it still revolves back round to design and time. Now, and when let's talk about time for a second, we've talked about time of how we lead up to a project and where it can be important to engage early and thus make your time work better for you. But then going on to the project and delivering the projects become under more and more scrutiny from time. The programs can be reduced, can be changed, can be chopped up, and we see on large instances where the project still needs to be delivered to obviously the correct standard in a reducing amount of time. Well, and unfortunately, again, going back to workmanship, if you squeeze hard enough, you may deliver the product, the project, but it could be at the detriment of other areas, and that all comes back down to time again.
And I suppose also, the whole building safety regulations. Obviously, there have been huge issues about that. There's huge changes that they've clearly been necessary. Is that just going to add another layer of bureaucracy almost, or is that actually, do you genuinely see that as something that's going to help? I think
the world we live in today, it's a bit of everything. And bureaucracy is part of that. I think the changes with the BSR, the HSE obviously taking over the mantle, for want of a better word, for UK building regulations. We are now on the cusp of those key dates. Those dates starting, so, a couple of months time, and then into the early part of 2024. I think at the moment, in my opinion, regardless of the intricacies of the BSR and what's additionally now required over and above what perhaps developers and professionals would do as we sit here today, I think the realisation of the extent of the complexities is yet to be seen.
And Jack, the sort of role of the importance of advisors and someone like J3 Advisory. I mean, you deliberately set up, you set up the business. I mean, shake up is probably the wrong word, but you identified a very strong opportunity in the built environment sector and with house builders, and recognised an opportunity. So how has J3 evolved?
I think that the evolution, part of a lot of it is tied to the experience we have as we go on. As James says, there's a concoction of challenges that developers are facing, and they filter down to people like us because we have to juggle them as they land on our desk and hopefully make things a little bit easier. I think that the biggest evolution for us is that we have to build credibility with these people by the questions that we ask. I think that the challenge for lots of people that are service providers to developers and house builders is that they're very eager to please. You're dealing with people that are detail driven, intelligent and common sense led, and getting all of that together is, I think, not that common generally in wider life, but in development, to be successful, I think that's what most developers possess as core skills, and as a result, there's a lot of people pleasing that goes on with developers. The developer will perhaps say, "Here are the details. I need the quote in a week." I understand that. That's not necessarily how this is going to play out. So I think that challenging their expectations. We talked about setting expectations and managing them earlier. I think that by doing that in the first instance and holding the developer's hand and saying, look, this is how this is going to work, and being the architect of that process with regards to insurance from a J3 perspective is key, and that builds some credibility, and the questions that we ask about the scheme and the process from the developer's standpoint and their wider team is where our credibility really comes from. So I think that evolution is we've learned that actually we understand the intricacies of our market very well. We have strong partnerships with people like James to be able to rely and lean on their expertise to the benefit of the client. And it doesn't always mean, some of the most positive conversations we have, they end up as the most positive. They perhaps start that way. So I think that what we've learned is that if we wanted everybody to like us the whole way through the process, then possibly we should sell ice creams for a living, rather than arranging structural warranties. But I think that's the key thing is always to take a breath. As James says, developers are fantastic at pivoting and saying, okay, there's a challenge there. What do we need to do to be able to navigate our way through it? A bit like interest rates shoot up, and now we're all built to rent developers. So I think that's we have to, we have to follow that lead and say, okay, right, we need to be able to pivot and do things perhaps differently. And I think that one of the challenges that developers always face is that people constantly want to please them. Their broker wants to say yes to everything. We can do that for you, and that mismanages expectations the whole way through. It just makes someone's life harder. So that's our general direction. And
when you started J3, I don't know how far you go back, but did you sort of go to James and say what you were looking to do? And James, did you go, about time someone took that approach? Do you see it as a very singular and different approach and a refreshing approach to?
Yeah, I think what Jack envisaged and what J3 do is refreshing. As Jack and I will jest, I call him a broker, and he says, we're advisors, James, we're not brokers. And that's very true. That's very true. And so I think J3's standing in the marketplace, amongst many others that are also very well regarded, allows them, coining the word Jack just used, it allows J3 to pivot. And it allows them to add that value with the clients that they are or are about to work with. As far as our relationship goes, like many good relationships, it goes back a way. And being one of the leading surveyors and companies in the market that provide the inherent defects auditing process, and obviously J3 being right up there with some of the best advisors in the market, I think it's almost like an obvious relationship, and again it goes back to that added value that we can offer.
And actually, James, with sort of approved consultant services, obviously you operate national auditing surveyors for A-rated insurers. What does that mean in layman's terms?
That means you can find us as a company on a 3-bed self-build house down in St Ives, or you can find us in central London or in the Scottish Isles, auditing any manner of projects, any type of construction, and we do it across the UK from several offices and overseas, into the Channel Islands and into Ireland. So, and we provide compliance and auditing for the inherent defects market.
And obviously, it's incredibly important to involve auditors throughout the process, isn't it? That's key.
It is. Whilst there are instances where providers, for their own reasons, may look at a part complete or a started project, the general rule of thumb is if you want to achieve the best outcome, whether that be from your warranty product, the build process, or from a commercial point of view, when you're involving a warranty provider, it is to get them involved, and get everyone on board before you put your spade in the ground.
Yeah,
Appreciate you can't always do that, as we see time and time again every day. But I think, and Jack may have an opinion on this, it's getting increasingly harder as time goes by to gain the buy-in of the wider teams and experts on projects that have commenced or are part complete.
Yeah, I think there is still a shortage of capacity in the warranty market from insurers or underwriters that will sit behind insurers in that space, and that creates something of a perfect storm, because there are lots of opportunities for experienced developers where maybe less experienced or lightly capitalised developers have fallen foul on a scheme, and there are these part complete developments that are available to be purchased and then completed. So you then have that other challenge of, James is quite right, before soft strip starts on a conversion, or before you put a spade in the ground on a new build, that is the moment that you need to have the warranty in place for it to be most commercially attractive for you as the developer from a viability perspective. And also to make sure that the build is the best it can be from an auditing perspective. But then where you have part complete opportunities, and that is what they are for experienced developers, it's important that they can still access the warranty market and believe that they can access it. And whilst it is tough, and as James and I frequently discuss, on certain cases where we need support from a warranty provider, and it's about pulling that story together, that there are too many developers that maybe think, we're not going to be able to get a warranty on that, or we're not going to be able to get A-rated support on that. Do we look at other areas of the market? Do we look at alternative products? I think that there are, just about at the time of writing, there's enough support in the markets to still be able to do those jobs as well. But again, it just comes back to the original points of clear communication. I'm not going to bring timing into that one, because there is no time on a part complete development that someone's about to buy. So no. It's just about communication and trying to work through those.
With house builders, is there, obviously they've got a huge amount on their plate at any one time. Is there something obvious that they could be doing, not to make your life easier necessarily, but to make their life easier? That is there a frustration, a sort of generic frustration? Maybe it's the house builders' lack of understanding of the process in some cases. Maybe, I don't know, if you're sort of king for the day and could implant something in house builders just to make this the whole process easier. Is there?
Yeah, I think that generally you find, I don't know what James thinks, but developers and house builders that seem to do particularly well consistently over a long period of time have a framework with regards to the professionals that they engage, be that surveyors, be it architects, cost consultants, planning experts. And they have that consistency across all of their projects that allows continuity, and it creates opportunity for them, because it's that conveyor belt. It becomes more and more seamless each time, assuming that it continues to work. But they refine that process, and I think that whether it's us or somebody else, and for some people it's working directly with the provider. Once you have that process that works, I think the jumping around on the warranty, if you have something that's functioning and serves you, it can cause you more issues than it could. The downside is greater than the upside. So I think that it's finding the continuity on the warranty. Whether that's having somebody that's an extension of the team like us that offers advice, and that if you need to move between providers because your projects are different, appetite changes, then you can do that. But I think that I've been surprised by the amount of developers in the upper end of the SME market and into the large scale projects who have said to us, having done the first transaction, arranged the first policy, we've got this scheme, that one's coming down the pipe. You're now part of the framework. You've done the first one. We need you to do the others. Oh, okay, fine. You're in. You've done that, and those are the guys that are pushing on and getting it done. I think there's especially with insurance, and that warranty market has become. You've only got to type in warranties, and you can type in to look for Premier Guarantee, and all of Sundry are offering you their wares for 30% cheaper on there, and that's where that market has been driven to. Historically from CRL, who went pop in 2018. So I think that there's a big danger. Lots of people have learned from it, but there are lots of people that are still penny wise, pound foolish when it comes to especially structural warranties, but insurance generally. So I think that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So if you've got your framework for insurance and you've got your person that you trust to do it, that's that should be the MO going forward.
Yeah, and I think with that framework type approach, ultimately what that brings and develops goes back to that trust, that relationship at the end of the day. So whether it be through an advisory type approach or direct business, ultimately, if everyone gets comfortable with each other in the design team or the wider client team, then you're almost knowing what that individual or individuals are going to do next before they've done it, which allows you to better prepare. And it's no different to sports that you might see on the TV when the team works better together, and it's the same team that's winning every week on the pitch. Then you're not just going to change half the team overnight, sort of thing, just because you feel like it. And it's no different in construction. That's
a very good analogy, actually. It's probably back where we started in terms of that partnership, isn't it? The wider partners and seeing every component part not as a potential spanner in the works, but another cog in the wheel. Really. It's getting that right. Also, I mean, with house builders, again, I'm putting them all in one category, but and I suppose you could again use the analogy with car insurance. Just go for the cheapest quote. What's the cost, etc., etc. But there's so many variables, aren't there, to take into account when on a massive scheme.
I think that one of the things that we always talk about is that development is a contact sport. So I think that. Yes, you can always opt for the cheapest option, but I think that in development you're going to have claims. Our objective is that if we're going to arrange insurance for you, we want to put you in the best position that if you have a valid claim, it pays out. I think that's a good starting point for insurance, rather than let's go with the cheapest one. And what's going to give us the peace of mind? That's what insurance is purchased for. It isn't necessarily for the claims. It's for when you go to sleep at night, that you've got the peace of mind that you've got the right cover in place. That's what everyone thinks about, not, actually, I saved 17% on my warranty when they go to sleep. Often, if you've bought the cheap warranty from the provider that you maybe have some concerns about, someone that makes you think and go, did I do the right thing there? And that concern, when you think about reputational damage, we talk about developers taking a bit of a shoe in the press, where you have those instances where maybe there are some challenges on site and there's also inadequate insurance in place. That tarnishes everybody else, and that's where the experienced developers suffer as a consequence.
Yeah, they do, and I think as well, latent defect insurance is different in the marketplace as a product, in so much as most insurances are annually renewable. They're 12 months long. Okay, there is deviation there, but generally they're annually renewable. In the defects market, insurance is, we coin the term long tail. It's 10 or 12 years. So are you happy on day zero that the product you purchased at a discount is still going to be the correct product, or there to assist the process in 9+ years' time? Question. The other thing to bear in mind now is, going forward, whilst we haven't seen it in practice in the marketplace yet, obviously the government and others are heavily now supporting a 15-year policy. Now, obviously, they're not going to provide it themselves, but it takes the current insurers and their capacity to consider that. So again, out of all the insurances that you may want to save on the premium, whilst of course you need to be competitive at the end of the day, you have to still be astute enough to make sure that insurance that you purchase on day zero is going to be fit for purpose in 7, 8 years, 10 years' time. And as Jack said, CRL, unfortunately to their detriment, is a good example of that. where maybe they were assisting in lower policies and lower premiums, but unfortunately they're no longer with us, and it's caused everyone a little bit of a headache along the way.
More than one.
Well, gentlemen, no, that was absolutely fascinating, and actually just highlighted how hugely important this area is for the house building industry, and it's been incredibly enlightening. So just a big thank you to you, Jack Bristow, Managing Director of J3 Advisory, and James Calland, Managing Director of Approved Consultant Services. This has been the podcast from J3, brought to you by J3 and Showhouse magazine, first in a new series, and we look forward to the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.